Okay, but the implications for the dollar could be quite interesting. The implications for the world economy could be very worrying. So how are you viewing dollar and interest rate now?
Again, never listen to the supposed expert. There was me saying that I thought that the dollar would weaken. And what's the dollar gone and done? Strengthen.
Yeah. That's markets.
Yeah, it's markets for you, completely unpredictable. So I mean, I was just reading an interesting note here from one big asset management firm, not unrelated to SG, and they track
lightly. One.
The company called Lixil. And they track hedge funds, and it's very interesting because you can always see where the traders are moving in, and their very interesting argument, which is that most hedge funds had been net short the dollar, and in the last couple of months they've swung violently to net long the dollar. And in fact, if you look at a broad basket of the dollar pairs, which is called the DXY, then they've actually gone up by about 3.5% over the last since mid-April. In fact, so it's only a month.
What? Yeah.
So that's 3.5%.
Yeah.
And there's some quite big moves there. So, for instance, since mid-April, the US dollar versus the New Zealand dollar has been up 5.6%. Wow, it would be there.
Wow.
Anyway,
okay.
But I would point out against a few, like the South African Rand, South African ZAR, it's only up 1.4. So there's been, it depends on the currency you're looking at.
Yeah.
But the dollar's strengthened. What will happen to the dollar next?
Can I just ask on the dollar? Is it basically safe haven stuff? Is it rising interest rate stuff?
Yeah, I mean that's probably we don't want to overcomplicate it. The logical thing would be is that the money is flowing to an economy which is increasing its interest rates, that has safe haven status.
Yeah.
People worry that if all hell breaks out with, fill in the blank space, North Korea, Iran, any other country that Trump wants to pick up, then probably American dollar's place to be. I would guess.
Yeah. Okay, so on that position, one would be long dollar.
Yeah.
Against most currencies or not?
No. See, I still think though, even though a lot of the CTAs and the macro hedge funds and everything have gone long the dollar, I still think there are strong forces that are likely to make the dollar weaken.
Yeah.
Not least the fact that China is I think China is going to look to reduce its treasury exposure. I think one of the other things
that goes against what most people are saying.
Yeah, I know it does, but I think they will. I think they might find a deal on trade, but they might say, well, you know what, we'll give you on one hand, and we'll reduce our treasury exposure.
But that would weaken their value of their own position, wouldn't it?
Maybe, but I think they'll do it. I also think US equities are losing appeal. We've got the increasing fiscal deficit in America. There's upward pressure on the euro. And this is the thing which actually a lot of people understand is that the cost of hedging with dollar has gone up radically in the last few weeks.
That is a good point.
And I think if you add them all up, and there's a series of deep structural changes happening in the global economy, which is, America is doing very well at the moment, but it is basically increasing its fiscal deficit. It's sucking money in, and emerging markets, I think, are also looking pretty strong. And I just think that the arguments.
Well, not every emerging market.
No, not every emerging market, but certainly the key ones are.
Yeah, sure.
And I just think that, from my view, it sort of suggests the dollar will weaken after its current strengthening, but who knows?
Well, that's right. Well, if people have enough dollars, then they think about not having so many.
Yeah, and I think the one to watch out for, actually, again, we've talked a bit about this before, is I would look out the cable rate, because I think the chances of Brexit, for instance, being a little uncertain over the next month or two is quite high.
Yeah.
For, I think, whatever one's view on Brexit, I think it is fairly clear that Her Majesty's UK government doesn't have a settled position on what it wants to do about Brexit.
You could say that.
And I think that is, and that's regardless of what your view of Brexit is. And I think that the FX markets are very live to that factor. And I think that in the short term, an interesting trade could well be, strengthening dollar, weakening pound even more. So it's down at 135 at the moment.
Yeah.
I think it's not impossible. You could see it nudge maybe back down to 130 if there's some bad news around Brexit,
which is quite possible.
But I would still personally, so in the short term, that would probably be where you might be in the short term. I still think the dollar will probably weaken over long term. But I suppose for those people who've got that kind of more trader mentality, I suppose they might be looking at the dollar. But bear in mind that even if you went from 135 to 130, that's not a big move.
So I think would you go with dollar yen? I seem to remember you're quite keen on the yen. last time we
spoke. I still am quite keen on the yen. That's
a really interesting trade, that.
Yeah.
So you still have that one on?
Yes. Yeah. I still think I'll probably be the yen, but I mean, the yen is so utterly unpredictable.
Yeah. Well.
So it's very difficult to know what the hell is going on with that trade.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't change my view on that. No.
So why do you think the US market's so relatively sanguine at the moment, with the VIX still being so low?
Yeah, it's a good question. Don't know.
No. That's not a good thing to say in an interview.
Yeah, I know.
You don't say you don't know.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, it's very hard.
Make something up.
Yeah, well, it's very hard to understand why. And the reason I suppose I say that is that earnings growth in the US is starting to level off. There are more and more concerns about the sheer level of buybacks and the sheer level of leverage.
Yeah.
US equities are, and will continue to be very overvalued compared certainly to European and certainly UK equities. It's hard to understand a strong argument for buying US equities in general, but there are some US equities doing very well. So Amazon, for instance, everybody's least favourite tech business.
I think if it is anything to do with tech, I guess, and some belief in technological revolutions.
Yeah, and then the whole FANG thing is still relevant. I mean, they may be getting loads of negative publicity, but the FANGs are still churning out the cash profits.
Well, that's absolutely, and you've got more applications of tech, and I mean, I can tell you for nothing, and you know that to launch a fund, you have to have some tech angle in it.
Yeah, it's astonishing. So that maybe that cycle's got longer to run. I've been relatively bearish in relative terms on US equities versus other things, particularly actually Japanese equities and European equities. And I personally would still be bearish, kind of medium to long term US equities, but who knows what happens in the short term.
Short term could be good for longer. And Europe recovery over?
No, I don't think so.
I'm not sure either, actually. No. I don't know why I said that.
No, yeah. I don't think. I think if anything, the Germans and the French and the Dutch and the North Europeans are in pretty good, strong state. I suppose the great unsettling factor is Italy.
Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah, we mentioned that one last time.
Funny that.
Yeah. And they're dangerously close to forming a government, which really worries me.
Yes, they are. It is
the worst thing that could happen to Italy.
It is the market's nightmare scenario. I actually happen to think it's not a nightmare scenario, because I actually think the two parties they're both populist parties.
Yeah.
So it's the League and the Five Star Movement.
Yeah, sure.
And I think actually both of those parties need a good slap around the head and understand what real politics in government is like.
Yeah.
And maybe actually government might be a sobering experience for both of them.
Nothing like a bit of that to calm you down.
Yeah, and I think actually they may end up looking, I mean, everybody was petrified about Trump, and Trump didn't turn out so bad for the time being for the equities.
Well, sure. Well, for equities, not for everything else, maybe a bit.
And I think oddly enough, that might be the same way for Italian equities. Everybody thinks, oh my God, the League and the Five Star Movement getting into bed together. But they might end up maturing and becoming more sobering.
Does that mean that, so on that level, would you be a bit long the euro?
No, I
know.
I think the euro is probably fully valued where it is at the moment.
Yeah.
I wouldn't move. I don't really have a strong view either way. What I think would be more interesting is that Italian equities have had a good kick in.
Yeah.
And Italian equities might be an interesting.
That
place
could be
an
interesting moment, couldn't it?
Yeah. There's been a very negative trade on Italian.
There are
equities.
some pretty decent companies in Italy that are used to dealing with hard times.
Yeah, and MIB, which is the main index, is being kicked a bit. Yeah. And actually, that might be a very interesting place to sniff around.
Yeah, and I can't resist asking you about Argentina and Turkey and all those countries that have got fairly high debts and difficulties in servicing them.
Yes, I mean that was always slightly predicted with the rising US interest rates.
Yeah, I know, it's almost like a knee-jerk, isn't it?
Yeah, it's inevitable that those countries that have got lots of dollar debts, and those are two countries with lots of dollar debts, would get hit quite badly.
Yeah.
I would point out that the main emerging markets, which is the BRICS, are in pretty fine form.
Yeah.
Russia is actually in very strong shape. China's in pretty strong shape. Well,
Russia will be at the higher price.
Yeah, absolutely, because the oil price. I've just come back from India. India is booming at the moment, in pretty good solid state, not doing as well as Modi'd like, but doing pretty well.
Yeah.
And even Brazil is picking itself off the floor, helped again by oil prices. So, BRICS, which is the main component, the BRIC of the emerging markets, they're in pretty strong shape at the moment.
Is it worth calling Russia a bit higher yet?
I think Russia could go high,
Who knows?
All the politics aside.
Yeah.
But I've heard some very convincing arguments from emerging market specialists that the one market you probably want to be at the moment is Russia.
Yeah, no, I heard something similar. Yeah.
So, all of them have got corporate governance issues. All the BRICS, China, Brazil, Russia, Russia, and China.
Yeah.
India slightly less, and Brazil slightly less. They've all got corporate governance issues, but Russia is in an interesting place at the moment.